Hello guys, James from Goddard Radio Moscow Beer Reviews here for you again with another beer review. For this one we are going to continue on with the Victorian beer kind of little mini series that I've been doing for you over the last little while, and we're going to stick to Melbourne for this one. We're going to go to the Thornbury district and visit the Three Ravens Brewery, and this beer is simply called Dark and it's a smoke beer. So this is, if you've watched my channel before, you know that the Schlenkerla and Spezialrauch beers are probably two of my favourite beers that I'll ever try, so I'm probably quite picky with this style, but I'm really interested to see what it's like. And I did have a very good smoke beer from France in one of my reviews. That must have been about 50 or so videos ago, but I really love the smoke beer style, so I'm quite interested to review this beer for you today. As always, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery. Just fast forward straight to the tasting if you don't want to see that. The brewery website is in the video description for you below, along with a link to my other reviews that I probably will do from Three Ravens in the next little while. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about this brewery, Three Ravens, as I mentioned to you, are based in the Thornbury suburb of Melbourne, and their first beer was brewed specially for a wedding. However, by 2003 they'd actually gone on to open a warehouse brewery where they were producing European style beers for local independent pubs throughout the city of Melbourne. So the brewery was placed up for sale in 2013 as a result of disagreements between the original owners, but it was actually bought by Mash Brewing from Western Australia, who were looking for somewhere to brew their beers in the Australian East Coast, and now the brewery actually brews beers for both labels. There's a lot of good breweries out in Western Australia, but for those of you who don't know so much about Australia, what you have to remember is the main chunk of the population is on the east coast of Australia, and on the west coast the only kind of fairly big population centres you have is probably Perth down in the southwest, and then Broome in the kind of northwest, but I think Broome isn't even that big at all. I'll probably go and visit there at some point, but that's one of the things a lot of the Western Australian breweries do, is to get a second brewery on the east coast. But Mash actually pumped money into the Three Ravens facility, and they did some rebranding, and they also bought some new equipment for the brewery as well, and they were actually named the Champion Small Australian Brewery this year in 2014, so it's quite a well decorated brewery, this one, and hopefully the beer kind of lives up to that accolade. Just to list the other beers for you that these guys do, you have the 55 American Pale Ale, the White, which is obviously a wit beer, you have the English ESB beer, Black 55, which is a black American Pale Ale. You have the Golden, which is, it's simply called Golden, and that's an alt beer. You have this guy, Dark, which is the smoke, and you also have Black, which is a stout beer. So just to tell you a little bit about this beer itself, it's a 5% smoke beer, and as I mentioned to you, it's actually, they say it uses a unique blend of German malts, which I'm guessing is the Rauch malts that you'll get from the Nuremberg area of Germany, and it uses Hallertau hops as well. Of course, this is one of the famous hop growing regions. This one is down in Bavaria. When I lived in Germany, I actually got to go and have a little bit of a look at these things, but it's modelled on a Franconian style, they say. So as I mentioned to you, I'm guessing this means that they want this beer to be in the style of a Rauch beer, which is obviously the two famous ones from Bamberg, where my friend lives, is obviously Schlenkerla and Spezial being the two very famous ones down there. So without further ado, let's get this guy open and we'll get on with the tasting here. It's 5% ABV. I'll just bring up the camera and let you have a little look at the artwork for this one. As you can see, it's quite a nice kind of interpretation of a modern, it's quite a nice little bit of modern art, really, isn't it? It's quite nicely, it's quite done, quite easily simple. It just says on the side, engineered by hand, this beer is the product of a craft brewing process in which traditional methods meet exacting standards. We take care to emphasise quality over quantity and use only the finest natural ingredients. It says on the side, Three Ravens Dark is a European smoked dark ale. A blend of unique German malts and classic Hallertau hops adds intrigue to an elegant yet welcoming beer, modelled on an age-old Franconian style ready to be rediscovered. Traditional bottle conditioning naturally carbonates this beer and helps add to its complexity. Serve cold at 6 to 8 degrees, so it should roughly be here. And as you can actually see on the thing, it's got a West Coast and an East Coast address for these brewery, which is, as I mentioned to you, that's one of the big things, Victoria and Western Australia. So let's get this guy open and get on with the tasting here. Quite looking forward to trying this one. As you can see, nice smoky opening. As I mentioned to you in my last video, I really need to get one of these little goblet glasses that I had back home. If anyone knows where I can actually find these things in the Melbourne area, let me know please, because I'm not such a great fan of this little kind of mini tankard glass that I have, but it does the job. So you can even smell the kind of smoky, sort of roasty and smoky things as you pour this beer. So let me just bring this up to you and let you have a look at it. As you can see, it's got a nice kind of solid one finger, slightly beigey coloured head. It's nearly white, but it's a kind of beigey creamy colour. It's a nice kind of mahogany colour, this one actually, a kind of mahogany chestnut, a nice bit of red element to it. If I hold it over to the light, I'm not sure how well you can see that, but there's a good bit of big carbonation just going up to the top of this beer. Quite a lot actually. The Rauch beers normally in Germany aren't so carbonated, they're very, very smooth, but sometimes when you get that with the bubbles in the beer, it's actually quite deceptive and it's not quite as carbonated as you might think. But yeah, you can smell in the aroma, it's got a nice kind of dark roasted malt, a nice smoky element to it as you would expect. But it's got a nice kind of underlying caramel there. Out of all the smoked beers I've smelled, this one is actually closest to what you would expect from Schlenkerla. This is the closest one to the Schlenkerla on tap. But it's got a nice kind of smoky burnt wood aroma, which is the typical trademark of Schlenkerla, which is obviously what they're going for. And you've maybe got a bit of meatiness in there as well, but it's very kind of ashy, and just underneath it there's a really dark, sweet and roasted caramel element to it. It smells beautiful, this beer. It's got exactly everything you would expect if you know the German style that they're going for. So let's give it a taste and see how we get on. So this is the Three Ravens Smoke from Thornbury district in Melbourne. Cheers. Yeah. It's got, on first kind of tasting, you get the smoky, kind of ashy, woody elements going towards the back of the mouth. It's a good bit wetter than the German style actually, and I can see why they would do that in Australia, just because of how hot this country can get. But it's nicely done, this one. Yeah, I would stick with that. It's not quite as heavy as the German one, and it's not quite as smooth, but it's very, very light at the same time. As I say, that's just a kind of typical trademark of Australian beer. But yeah, it's quite subtle in the flavour. You've got that nice kind of meaty flavour that goes underneath, and it's a nice sort of smoky element to it there. You can see the dog's just come to say hello to me there, you can hear them plodding around. But yeah, it's a nice kind of smoky, nice really roasty smoky element that sits on the back of the tongue there. It's got a nice wet element to it as well that just goes around to the front of the palate, but it's a really nice beer, this one, and it's very well done. This is the closest smoked beer I've found to the kind of German style. But yeah, it's got the caramel in this one, I should say that. You can smell the caramel a lot in the aroma, but it doesn't come out so much. It's mainly the woody and kind of ashy element that you're picking out on this one quite a lot. That sits at the back of the tongue. The meat, the kind of gamey meat flavours just sit in with that. It doesn't have so much in the way of flavour around the front of the tongue. It just feels kind of nice and wet actually. There's maybe a little element of vanilla to it, and as I say, the caramel and the honey that you would expect from the aroma are very, very subtle, so it's quite interesting that it's mainly the smoke that is coming out, so it's a very interesting take on the style actually. And in terms of the mouthfeel, as I said to you, it's not quite as smooth as the German versions of the Rauch beer. It's more along the lines of a very kind of light-bodied version of it. Like, there's a good bit of carbonation in there that just kind of gets you on the front of the tongue, but it's very, very nice and quite a wet mouthfeel. As I said, that's something that you would expect from an Australian beer just because of how hot this country is down here. But it's very, very easy drinking. And in the aftertaste, you're just getting this kind of smoke flavour just lying over the tongue, and it's got quite a dry character to the mouthfeel just in the aftertaste as well. So it's a very, very interesting beer, and overall, I would say that this is probably the one that's closest to the German versions of this beer that I've had before. And I've spent a lot of time in Bamberg and drank quite a bit of both the Spezial and also the Schlenkerla one, and this is probably the closest one I've come across to it so far. So I have to compliment Three Ravens on that. They've done a very, very interesting take on it. The only real difference in this one is that the carrot, that it is a little bit less The mouth body is a little bit less full than the Schlenkerla one, but as I say, that's what you expect from an Australian brewery. So it's a very, very good brewery. I hope that I can actually review some more of these beers in the next little while, because I've heard that Three Ravens are a very, very good brewery, and they've got their little brew pub that I should go and check out as well. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed my review of this beer and that you kind of agree with the things that I've said about it. Let me know in the comment section, as always, your own thoughts on this beer. It's always interesting to hear that. As I've been asking from my Australian viewers for the last little while, please let me know your favourite breweries in Australia and beers that you'd like me to review. I'm really interested just to get a good feel of the beer while I'm down here. So please like, subscribe, share, comment, all the usual YouTube stuff. I thank you for watching this beer review, and I will be back with another Victorian beer review very soon. Cheers.